Peace and blessings, brothers and sisters. Once again, this is the Cosmocentric Mystic coming at you today with a conversation about Christianity once again. So I'm doing a series on early Christianity, primarily because back in December, I think if you heard this story before, I'm sorry, I'm just going to end up repeating it over and over. On Christmas of 2019, I had a person respond to a comment that I made on the Jabari versus Vince Bantu debate. In that debate, I said Bantu won because he came with more factual information. Not that he's necessarily right; he just won the debate. And then that was the gist of my video. I mean, I was highly surprised because the information that Jabari presented was information that some of the information that led me into consciousness, so to speak. And to hear it refuted and debated, and then to hear other information to confront it was fascinating to me. I was extremely fascinated and surprised. I did not know about this apologetics community. And so anyway, this brother comments on my video and engages me in a debate that lasts maybe 6 hours or so, back and forth on the cell phone or whatnot, commenting on YouTube. Now, I'm not that big of a social media type of person, so I wasn't aware of what was going on. I was just engaged in the conversation. But he told me it's best that I look up early Christianity. And so, challenge accepted. And what you have here is reports on the various different types of early Christianity. So that's what this series is about. Now, today's discussion is going to be about a group that was intense, that was big, that was widespread, that went from Egypt to Rome to Syria. It's going to be called the Gnostics. They are called the Gnostics. And in modern day times, you have people that view the Gnostics as the mystical side of Christianity, which they were. And we are going to go over some of their doctrine, go over some of their gospels, go over how it came to be, how we know about them, so on and so forth in this lecture series. So I hope you enjoy. I did a little bit of research on this. Of course, you can do your own research. It's not like I meditated and came and downloaded this information. No, this is information that I researched. So enjoy. If there are some statements that I make that are incorrect, feel free to correct me. It's not like I'm married to this information, but it is interesting, and I hope you find it educational and elucidating. So without any further blab, let's begin. All right, the Gnostics. The truth about the Gnostics, it's too late for me to go back and correct this because you already see it, so whatever. Now, the history. So until the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library and some of the other finds with the Apocrypha and things of this nature in the 20th century, the only information that we had on the Gnostics came from the early church fathers, specifically Tertullian and Irenaeus, and their refutation or refuting some of the claims that the Gnostics made. Now, the term Gnosticism, they didn't necessarily refer to themselves as Gnostics, but the term Gnosticism is a term used to describe various Gnostic movements or various Christian movements in the early church. So the word comes from Greek, which is gnosis, which means knowledge. It's a special knowledge. It's an esoteric knowledge that comes from personal experience and awareness in order to they say achieve salvation. I'm going to say to elevate consciousness, to understand that you are attuned in an essence with the one. Anyway, so this is the meaning of the secret esoteric knowledge is given by revelation from the divine realm. So you attune to the divine realm either through meditation or ritual. Now it's only given to the chosen. So what does that mean? What does it mean to the chosen? It means to the people that feel the inner call for spiritual development. To the brothers and sisters that feel as if though the material world and all of the philosophies that permeate the material existence are not sufficient to describe the relationship that you have with the divine essence. And so they're looking for deeper meaning. They're looking for pathways and ways of access to the divine essence. And they choose themselves. They choose to take on the discipline. They choose to take on the path in order to manifest the divine essence. So also knowledge of oneself, who you are, where you came from, and how you got here, and how you can return. So the Gnostics, Slake Eye Coat came. All right, so if there's been a lapse, things doesn't make sense, I apologize. I had to go run and take care of something. But the Gnostics, they felt that the material world is an imprisonment for sparks of the divine essence who came to be here because of a cosmic disaster that took place. These divine sparks need to be liberated, or become aware and conscious of their divine essence. They become liberated by conscious growth and awareness of who they are and the practices that they need to engage in order to escape confinement by the material body. So now this religion, it made sense for people who feel like for some reason they don't, no, that one was wrong. This religion, this pathway makes sense to brothers and sisters that feel an essence and a higher calling, as if though the social parameters of the world does not answer that inner essence that they feel within. So that was what the proto-Orthodox Christian religion and the Orthodox Christian religion of today does not do for brothers and sisters. It does not answer the call of how to manifest the divine essence which is within. This is why the Gnostics were so successful, because coming from a large part of them were in the mystery schools, or a lot, the places where the mystery schools took place: Egypt, Syria, Egypt and Syria by and large. And so these are places that are known to have had mystery religions. And when we say mystery religions, we're talking about indigenous religions. Indigenous-based religions always had a way of accessing the divine essence. I'm tired of that conversation, mystery schools, as if though it's a mystery and then it can't be discounted. What we need to really couch the conversation is its cultural understanding of how to interact with the universe. And that all indigenous peoples have that. Now, when you have a mass civilization like Egypt or Syria, then you codify those patterns and those ways of behavior that manifested in that culture. That's all it is. But by and large, it's not a mystery religion, it's the indigenous cultural way of accessing the divine that got codified into an educational system. Anyway, the Gnostics, this is what they teach, this is what they preach. It's very, you can find, this sounds like Hinduism, it sounds like Buddhism, it sounds like, well, by and large, Hinduism and Buddhism. It sounds like creating within the self, has in Vajrayana Buddhism, the adamantine body, the diamond body, the diamond essence of will, spiritual will, to manifest the divine energy. Well, anyway, up until 1945, everything that we knew about the Gnostics, it came from these proto-Orthodox church fathers. Irenaeus and his madness against heresies, it was attacking different systems. Now, remember, Gnosticism was a word to describe various Christianities. You do have some Gnosticism that was off. Like, you had a sect that saw Cain as a savior symbol because he defied God. And so they would do a lot of licentious activities. They did do stuff. They did do some things this specific sect of Gnosticism did do some stuff which was kind of like, okay, this is clearly something off. But their whole thing was worshiping Cain because of his defiance of Yaldabaoth. And we'll talk about who that was later. And then the purpose of the proto-Orthodox church fathers was to subvert the Gnostic movement. Tertullian wrote his books, and he wrote against Marcion, which we discussed earlier, and I was discussing that there could be some connection between Marcion and Valentinius, because they were both in Rome, I believe it was, at the same time. So I believe they kind of talked to each other. They were homies, and they developed these systems together. Then you have Hippolytus, who was writing around the year 200, who maintained that the Bishop of Rome was a heretic. So he wanted his power because he wanted to say that the Bishop of Rome was heretic, and then he was the essence, he was the truth. So there was earlier Gnostics, there were earlier known Gnostic documents which described the Gnosticism that the church fathers disagree with. Thus, the documents were considered aberrations and the church fathers were believed. So the discovery. So Christian history, we know that the Christians, after the Council of Nicaea, that's when stuff started to hit the fan. Then you have the Council of Chalcedon and then all these various councils for men. Let me be clear. You had these councils of men gathering to determine and argue doctrine. Doctrine, not truth, but doctrine. How to interpret, how to agree upon doctrine, upon words, upon philosophy, upon theology, not truth. This is the arguments that they were having. And they were having this because they were trying to, Constantine wanted to have one single religion to rule through, one. And this is how, and then this idea of the one, which the proto-Orthodox church fathers were trying to push for the longest, is what the problem was. Now, after that, what they ended up doing was in the West, burning, destroying, killing everybody else that disagreed with what they were talking about. And so, let's just say at even Stephen 700, 600 really, but yeah, let's do 600. Let's pop it around the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and we can trace kind of like diasporic Jews and the creation of Islam. So from that time, from 600 on, nothing in the West. Gnosticism crushed, except through the church fathers. Up until, now you have various small little books that people know about, in the whole so-called lost books, the Bible, so on and so forth. This was really popular, back in the 90s and things of this nature when we were coming into consciousness, those of us in our late 30s, early 40s. But in December of 1945, some Bedouin, so this is Nag Hammadi right here in Egypt. Now remember, this is deep Egypt. This is Egypt proper. So this is where the Gnostics were, a large sect of them at least. They were all throughout, but we're talking about Africans, we're talking about indigenous people. In 1945, Bedouin discovered the Nag Hammadi library. Now the details are sketchy. So the story is that a man named Muhammad Ali and his buddies were going excavating. They found these jars, they broke them open, and in these jars they found 13 leather-bound books. They were like, let's divide them up, and then the others didn't want to, so they gave them all to Muhammad Ali. He took them home, put them up on the counter or whatnot. Later on, Muhammad Ali, not necessarily the same group, but Muhammad Ali and his family, they came across a dude that they had beef with. Essentially, they had some beef with him. Basically he offed one of their family members, so they went and offed him. So the authorities, which is really weird, like why weren't the authorities looking for this guy who killed or who offed Muhammad Ali's family members, but they came and got Muhammad Ali? It's really weird, but that's the story. The family offed the dude out of a blood feud. Then the authorities came and took and got Muhammad Ali. Before they got him, Muhammad Ali gave these books over to a church father. Why didn't he give it to a homie? Why didn't he give it to a friend? He gave it to a church father. It just so happened that the church father had a friend who was a priest that was traveling and who saw these books, who knew what they were, who contacted some people. And ultimately the books ended up in the Museum of Antiquities, and everybody was like, "Whoa!" It was what? Oh yeah, that's right. Muhammad Ali and they were searching for gold. They didn't know that these books actually existed. These are authentic books written by Gnostic Christians themselves, not by the church fathers, but by the Gnostics themselves. What was their philosophy? What was their understanding? Now, what they found was 13 leather-bound volumes. They were kind of like anthologies, like they were collections of writings. There were 52, they call them tractates, but there were 52 books, basically. Now, they were written on papyrus. Now, here's the thing. The books themselves come from the book. The leather on the book comes from the 4th century, 300s, right? But the letters within the book are much older. So it's like it's like us making a compilation of the original works and the writings of the presidents of the United States, right? So we could have works from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln, to John F. Kennedy, to Theodore Roosevelt, to Barack Obama, to George W. Bush, all in one book. Now, the compilation of those letters took place over hundreds of years. But if we have, let's just say, what's something modern? An ebook, which is a modern day version of those leather-bound volumes. You know, that ebook was created in 2020. However, it's a compilation of letters that are hundreds of years older. Can be, some of them, decades to hundreds of years older. And so that's what they found. The books were written in the late form of the Egyptian script, the later form of the Egyptian script, which is Coptic. And they found tiny fragments in like Greek and all of this other stuff. So there were different kinds of books. There were gospels that were written by Jesus' disciples, Gospel of Philip, Thomas. There were different apocalypses. There were revelations. There was conversations that Jesus had after the resurrection. There was the doctrine of resurrection. There was how the world, gods and human, not God, but gods and humans came into being. And then there were also tractates or letters that spoke against the proto-Orthodox. And you can see this in their writings, because in the writings they say, beware of those who believe that a dead man rose. Now the books are published. So the question becomes, let's go back here. See, this is Nag Hammadi, right? This is a big city. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found right outside of it, in the wilderness, so to speak, right? So the question becomes like, why were they buried in the wilderness that people would believe? Now we got to remember, the book itself dates to the 4th century, right around the leather-bound book, right around the time of hyper persecution of Christians of differing beliefs than the Orthodox, right? Or than the emerging Orthodox belief. And so nobody knows. Everybody's like, they decided, my guess is they decided to hide them to preserve them, the Gnostics, because they knew that they were, they knew that they were on a rampage, like, oh boy, Shanut, which existed earlier. Shanut was a little bit earlier. But people like Shanut, who was an Egyptian Orthodox priest, proto-Orthodox priest in Egypt, was running around terrorizing indigenous temples and other Christians of other faiths. So my belief is that they kind of hid them so that they wouldn't be destroyed. So now, after finding them and then reading them, we find that church fathers were right about some things, and then they were wrong about some things. For instance, they took the mythology literal. And we're going to look at the Apocrypha or John, or the secret teaching of John, which talks about how the divine and the human realm came into being. So in the Apocrypha of John, Christ appears to John and explains all of creation. And he says, originally there was one unfathomable God that was indescribable. It's that's starting to sound like Hinduism, Buddhism, and the ancient Egyptian mythology. The one is above all, it is beyond description. It is the all, and since it is the all, it cannot be confined, and all of that other conversation. If you're a mystic, and if you're engaged in spiritual cultivation along the lines of mysticism, then you know this conversation. This is an age-old conversation. Now, in the Gnostic cosmology, which is the study of the origin of the cosmos, in the Gnostic cosmology, the one being emanated a thought. This thought became a being. Then came foreknowledge, which is like intuition. Then came forth indestructibility. These are all these eons. These are called eons that manifested forth from the divine, right? And then there was a cascade of 360 eons that manifested all the way to this one called Sophia, who is wisdom. Now, Sophia, she wanted to give birth herself. So she gave birth without a consort, which reminds us of the Dogon philosophy, Urugu, right? This Urugu was a being that's incomplete, and he is birthed by the Dogon, I think it's the Dogon. Yeah, the Dogon creatress Amma. But in the womb, he fights free and tears, he gets birth before he's fully gestated, and therefore he's an incomplete being. And so all of his creations are incomplete. Likewise, because Sophia wanted to give birth without a consort, she brought forth Yahadabaoth, who was the God of the Old Testament. And he was an illegitimate offspring from Sophia, from wisdom. Now this God, just like Urugu, began to create all sorts of different things, angels, humans, the planets. And then he stole creative power from his mother, Sophia, and because he realized his creations had no life. And he took Sophia's creative power and he put it and entrapped it inside the material realm. Now, then there's all sorts of chaos, because then, and this is where you get a lot of the conversations that you have today that Christians are running up against, because people of rational minds are looking at Christianity and saying, look at this Old Testament God, and he's tripping out. He's killing people. He's telling David to go cut off people's genitals. His prophets are, allowing bears to come and eat children. It's like, whoa, this is kind of wild. But the God of the New Testament is like, everything is love, 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 be in love, peace and love, love, love it all. Someone smacks you on the cheek, love them and let them smack the other cheek. Love, love, love. So that's a different story, because the God of the Old Testament would be like, take them out. The God of the New Testament is like, love them down. But this is the way people were looking at it. People were like, well, this doesn't make sense. So this God was truly different. So there must have been different gods. And so the one true God sent an eon down. And that eon's name was Christ. And Christ came through the body in order to teach people to transcend the material physical realm to manifest the divine consciousness within. And then all of the emanations of the divine, of the gods from the one true God, so to speak, that's indescribable, indestructible, so on and so forth, were eons. And Christ was one of these eons. So, and they were called the pleroma, the fullness, the pleroma. Now, the church fathers, they listened to this and they took it literally. They didn't understand it as a myth to be interpreted figuratively and to be allegory. And so they accused them of being savages, when in fact, most Gnostics were ascetics, punishing their body as a place of imprisonment they needed to escape. You can get images, and this is a common theme in Christianity, to punish your body. Common thing in the Western world: cut off, become a eunuch, beat yourself with spiked belt on your back, and all this other stuff. It's really interesting. All right, yeah, it's interesting. That's all I can say. And then the church fathers accused them of being insincere, when in fact they were very sincere and very devotional. So that is the beginning of the understanding of the Gnostics. I hope you found this educational. In the next lecture, we will deal with some of the Gnostic teachings themselves.